The dawn sky over the Montana Territory did not look like morning, it looked like a bruise. Arthur Thorne stood at the frosted window of his ranch house, a tin cup of coffee growing cold in his calloused hand, watching the horizon shift from a deceptive rose to a sickly, greenish-gray that whispered of violence. It was the dead of winter, and in his 43 years of working this unforgiving land, Arthur had learned to read the weather better than he could read a primer. This storm wasn't just coming, it was hunting. He had built the Ironwood Ranch entirely alone. Every cedar fence post, every dug well, and every shingle on the roof was a testament to what a man could accomplish when he refused to rely on a soul other than himself. His father had gambled away their family homestead before Arthur turned 20, a betrayal that had carved a singular lesson into his bones: trust only yourself, need no one, and you will never lose everything to another man's weakness. The wind struck the house first, a physical blow that rattled the window panes in their frames. Within minutes, the snow arrived, not falling gently, but driving sideways in sheets so dense that the barn, only 70 yards away, vanished into the white abyss. Arthur's stomach turned over. His Herefords were scattered across the south pasture, 300 head of prime cattle, representing every dime and drop of sweat he had invested in this life. If they panicked in this white hell, they would drift with the wind until they piled up against the fences or fell into the frozen draws to die. Arthur grabbed his heavy wool coat and plunged into the storm. The wind screamed like a living thing, and the snow cut his face like shards of broken glass. He fought his way to the stable to saddle his mare, the animal pinning her ears back, sensing the fury of the squall. He pushed out into the blindness, the cold finding every gap in his clothing, stealing his body heat with greedy fingers. He found the cattle already running, blind with fear. He tried to turn the lead cows toward the shelter of the canyon, but the wind tore his shouts away before they could reach the animal's ears. His mare stumbled in a hidden badger hole, throwing him hard into a snowbank. Arthur struggled to his feet, spitting blood, watching in horror as his cattle vanished into the white chaos. Everything he had built, everything he had sacrificed his happiness for, was disappearing while he stood helpless in the snow. Then, through the howling white curtain, he saw her. She was a dark figure on a roan horse, moving through the blizzard with a calm that seemed impossible in such conditions. She rode with a fluidity that suggested she was born in the saddle, her horse responding to the slightest shift of her weight. To Arthur's disbelief, the cattle turned toward her as if she were magnetic, flowing around her mount in a river of red and white hide. She was gathering his herd, driving them south toward the barn with uncanny skill. Arthur remounted his shivering mare and followed, feeling more like a witness than a participant. The stranger worked with absolute focus, reading the land beneath the snow, anticipating where the cattle would break, and positioning herself to guide rather than chase. She moved like water, like the wind itself, untamed and precise. When they finally reached the massive southern barn, his entire herd flowed safely inside, out of the killing wind. Inside the barn, the silence was sudden and heavy. The woman slid from her saddle, and Arthur saw her clearly for the first time. She was small, of Chinese descent, her hair braided tight against her head. Beneath her heavy, worn coat, the hem of a brown prairie dress was visible, soaked and heavy with ice. She began unharnessing her exhausted horse, checking its legs with practiced, gentle hands. "Who are you?" Arthur's voice came out rough, scraped raw by the cold. She looked up briefly, her eyes dark and intelligent, calm as a deep river. "Does it matter?" "You just saved 300 head of cattle." "They needed saving," she said simply. Her accent was faint, blending with the drawl of the territory. She returned to her horse, effectively dismissing him. Arthur watched her work, noting the economy of her movements. She touched the animals with a mix of authority and tenderness that couldn't be faked. This was no drifter who had learned ranching from a book, she had the blood of the trade in her veins. "At least tell me your name," he pressed. "Mai," she said, tightening a strap. "Just Mai." She moved past him to check the cattle, her eyes scanning the herd with the assessment of a veteran drover. "The storm isn't done yet. You have feed stored in the loft." They worked through the howling day in near silence. She showed him where the hay bales needed shifting to create windbreaks, which water troughs needed the ice broken, and which calves looked colicky from the stress. She knew cattle the way he did from a lifetime of living alongside them. As darkness fell and the storm intensified outside, shaking the heavy timbers of the barn, Arthur tried again. "Come inside the house," he offered, feeling the chill in his own bones. "You can't stay in this barn all night." "I'm used to rougher accommodations," Mai replied, her voice polite but firm. "I appreciate the offer, but the tack room is fine. It has a stove and a cot. I've slept in worse." She disappeared into the small room at the far end of the barn, closing the door with a quiet finality that left no room for argument. Arthur stood in the snow between the barn and his house, the storm screaming around him. A stranger, a young Chinese woman in a brown prairie dress, had appeared from nowhere, saved his livelihood, and would not accept his thanks or even a warm meal. He walked back to his empty house more confused than he had been in years. The storm raged for 3 days. Each morning, Arthur found Mai already working when he reached the barn. She had checked the herd, broken the ice on the troughs, and cleaned the stalls. She worked like someone trying to outrun a memory. On the second day, he brought coffee and biscuits to the barn. She accepted them with a nod but kept moving. Her hands bore old scars, the kind that came from barbed wire and hard labor. "You know cattle," Arthur said, watching her examine a heifer's swollen hock. "My father was a rancher," she said, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Was?" Mai didn't answer, and Arthur knew better than to push. He had been where she was, that dark place where talking about loss felt like reopening a stitched wound. They worked side by side, and he found himself noticing things he hadn't expected. He noticed how she murmured to the nervous cattle, calming them with her tone rather than words. He noticed how she automatically checked latches and hinges, the habits of someone raised to maintain property. "Where were you headed?" he asked as they forked hay into the mangers on the second afternoon. "Nowhere in particular. Riding through a blizzard to nowhere seems unwise." She paused, the pitchfork balanced in her small hands. "I saw your cattle scattering. I knew where they would go in this wind. I figured I could help." "Why?" "Because they needed it," she returned to work, effectively closing the conversation. By the third day, the storm began to lose its fury. Pale, watery light filtered through the cracks in the barn walls. Arthur went out to assess the damage. Fences were down in 2 places, and a shed roof had collapsed, but the herd was intact. When he returned to the barn at midday, he found Mai in the doorway of the tack room, pale and swaying. "You need food," he said, stepping forward. "Real food, not just biscuits." "I'm fine." "You look like death." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Sweet talker." "I mean it. Come up to the house. I've got stew on the stove." "I appreciate what you're trying to do," her voice softened slightly, "but I don't need charity. You've got your cattle safe. The storm is breaking. I'll be moving on to nowhere in particular." "That's right," Arthur said, studying her. This woman had saved everything he owned and wouldn't accept a hot meal in payment. Pride recognized pride. "At least let me pay you for the work. 3 days of skilled labor. It's not charity, it's wages." "I don't want your money." She turned back into the tack room, gathering her few belongings into a worn canvas bag. Frustration flared in Arthur's chest. "Why did you help me if you won't let me help you back?" She stopped, her back to him. When she spoke, her voice carried a heavy weight. "Because your cattle were dying. That's reason enough." Through the barn's main doors, the sunlight finally broke through the thinning clouds. She would be gone within the hour, and he would never understand why she came or where she was going. "At least stay until tomorrow," he heard himself say. "The roads will be better. I could use help checking the foal damage." She faced him, her dark eyes searching his face. Whatever she saw there made her shoulders drop slightly. "One more day," she agreed. "Then I'm gone." That night, Arthur lay in his empty house, listening to the silence instead of the wind. He thought about the woman sleeping in his barn, wondering what she was running from. He found her at dawn on the 4th morning, collapsed in the barn aisle between the stalls. His heart hammered against his ribs. He ran to her, dropping to his knees. She was breathing but unconscious, her skin burning with a terrifying fever. When he lifted her, she weighed almost nothing. He carried her to the house, his mind racing. 3 days of non-stop work in freezing conditions, likely without enough food, sleeping in an unheated tack room. She had worked herself past exhaustion for his benefit. Arthur laid her in his guest room, piled quilts over her shaking form, and started water boiling for broth. He had nursed sick calves and injured horses. People couldn't be that different. The fever lasted 3 days. She drifted in and out, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost in fever dreams that made her cry out in a language he didn't understand, intermixed with English. In those fevered hours, fragments of her story spilled out. The drought came in June, she mumbled, eyes unfocused. Grass turned brown. Creek dried up. Papa said it would break. It didn't break. Arthur sat beside the bed, cooling her forehead with damp cloths. Had to sell the herd, she whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. Piece by piece. Papa watched them loaded on trucks like watching his children leave. Last cow went in September. He died in October. Just stopped. The doctor said heart failure. I know better. He died of losing everything. Easy now, Arthur murmured. You're safe here. My Lynn, she whispered. That's my whole name. Later that night, when her fever spiked again, Arthur shared his own story to the quiet room. My father gambled, he said softly. Cards, horses, anything with odds. Lost our ranch when I was 19. My mother left him. I stayed until the bank took the deed. He paused. I swore I'd build something no one could take. Spent 24 years building these fences. Never borrowed money I couldn't pay back tomorrow. Never needed help from anyone. He looked at her flushed face. Until now. Until you rode through that storm like a miracle. On the third night, her fever broke. Arthur had dozed off in the chair beside her bed. When he woke, the pale light of dawn filled the room, and her eyes were open, clear, watching him. Your cattle, her voice was a rasp. Relief flooded through him. Safe. All of them safe. Good. That's good. He helped her drink water. She looked around the room, registering where she was. You collapsed in the barn, he explained. 4th morning. You worked yourself sick. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be better. A hint of a smile touched her lips, then faded. I wasn't strong enough to save my father's ranch. Thought maybe I could save someone else's. Arthur reached out slowly, giving her time to refuse, and took her scarred hand in his. You did save it. You saved everything. Mai recovered slowly, and Arthur discovered she was as stubborn about accepting help as he was. She insisted on getting up the day after her fever broke, though she could barely walk to the kitchen. Sit down before you fall down, Arthur ordered, guiding her to a chair. I can work. You can barely stand. I don't take charity. Her jaw set in a line he recognized, the same one he saw in his own mirror. It's not charity if you're earning it, which you already did, he said. He crouched to meet her eyes. Stay through calving season. April and May. That's 7 weeks. Help me then, when you're strong enough to actually help. Mai studied his face, suspicion and hope warring in her expression. Wages? Fair wages for skilled work. Wages. Where would I stay? The foreman's cabin. It's been empty for years. Need some fixing up, but it's sound. I pay rent. Arthur bit back a smile. Fine. $10 a month. 20. You're negotiating to pay me more. I'm negotiating for dignity, she said, her eyes holding his. I stay in that cabin. I work for wages. I pay rent. Nothing given, nothing owed. That's the only way I'll do this. Deal, he said. 2 days later, Arthur heard horses coming up the road. He stepped onto the porch to see John and Mary Miller, his nearest neighbors, along with the town doctor. "Heard you weathered the storm all right," John called out, dismounting. His eyes went past Arthur to where Mai stood in the barn doorway, wearing her mended brown dress. "Also heard you've got company." "This is my Lynn," Arthur said, his voice flat. "She's working for me through calving season." Mary's eyebrows rose. "Working for you? Skilled ranch hand. Knows cattle better than most men I've hired." I see it. Mary's tone carried a judgment sharp as the winter wind. "And she's staying where, exactly?" "Foreman's cabin." Of course, the older woman's lips thinned. "Arthur. People will talk. A woman alone. A foreigner. On a bachelor's ranch." "Let them," Arthur said. The word surprised him. He had spent his life building respectability, avoiding gossip, but something about Mary's tone made anger rise in his chest. "Not our business how you run your ranch, Arthur," the doctor cleared his throat. "We just wanted to check you didn't lose too much in the storm. Lost some fence and a shed roof. Could have lost everything." Arthur's voice carried across the yard. "Miss Lynn drove my cattle to shelter when I couldn't. I owe her more than I can repay. Do I care what people whisper?" Mai turned and disappeared into the barn. After the neighbors left, Arthur found her packing her canvas bag. "What are you doing?" "Leaving. I won't damage your reputation." "My reputation isn't your concern." "It should be." She faced him, anger and hurt mixing in her expression. "I know what people think. They'll call me names, and they'll call you a fool. But they can call me whatever they want." "Easy to say when it's not your life they're destroying," Arthur interrupted gently. "You saved my livelihood. That's the truth. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth worrying about. You need work, and the foreman's cabin sits empty. Everything else is just noise." Mai's hand stilled on her bag. "Why do you care what happens to me?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do." April turned the world soft and green. Snow melted into running streams, and the grass pushed through the warming soil. Mai moved into the foreman's cabin, and they fell into a rhythm. She was up before dawn, checking cattle before Arthur finished his coffee. She rolled up her sleeves to help deliver calves, her small hands strong and sure. They worked mostly in comfortable silence, the kind that came from shared purpose. Arthur found himself watching her, the way she laughed at a clumsy calf, how she stared toward the mountains at sunset with visible grief in her eyes. One evening in late April, a heifer went into difficult labor. Even with both of them working, it took 2 hours of exhausting effort to pull the breeched calf free. When they finally got it breathing, Arthur and Mai sat in the straw, covered in birth fluids, exhausted. "Come on," Arthur groaned, standing. "I've got whiskey that'll take the ache out." They sat on his porch, passing the bottle, watching the sun paint the mountains purple. "That never gets old," Mai said softly. "Life winning. Your father taught you well." She nodded, taking a pull from the bottle. "He said a good rancher listens to the land. Pays attention to what it's saying, when the grass is stressed, when the cattle are uneasy. I forgot how to hear it after he died." Everything went quiet. "I understood that silence," Arthur said. "I spent 20 years building fences around this place. Thought if I made them strong enough, I'd be safe. Turns out building fences around yourself doesn't make you safe. Just makes you alone." She looked at him, her dark eyes catching the last light. "You're not alone anymore." The words hung between them. Arthur's chest tightened with the dangerous warmth of wanting someone close. "Neither are you." Their hands rested on the porch railing, inches apart. Mai shifted, and their fingers brushed. The contact sparked through him like touching a live wire. She felt it too, he saw it in the way her breath caught. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Mai stood up, too quickly. "Early morning tomorrow, Arthur." Thank you for the whiskey. She descended the porch steps, walking fast toward her cabin. Late May brought Mr. Holloway, the banker from the city, driving up in a black carriage that looked wrong against the ranch's rustic beauty. Arthur met him in the office, knowing what was coming. Cattle prices have dropped, Holloway said, spreading papers on the desk. Way down from last fall. And feed costs are up. That's storm damage, fencing repair, hay losses. It adds up. Arthur studied the numbers, his stomach sinking. How bad? You're near your credit limit. You need a strong calf crop and better prices come autumn, or you'll have to sell off land to cover debts. How much land? A quarter section. Maybe more. The land his father had lost flashed through Arthur's memory. History was trying to repeat itself. There's another issue, Holloway continued. Your summer help. Can you afford to keep her on? Arthur's jaw tightened. That's my business. It's mine when you're borrowing my bank's money. I'm not saying let her go because of small-town talk. I'm saying the numbers don't support the expense. After Holloway left, Arthur sat alone. The banker was right. If he kept Mai through the summer and paid her fair wages, he might lose the ranch. But letting her go felt like tearing something vital from his chest. He found her in the south pasture, fixing a fence. She looked up, her smile fading when she saw his face. What's wrong? He told her straight. Prices are down. I can't afford to keep you through summer. Mai's face went carefully blank. I understand. I can pay you through the end of May. Give you a reference. I understand. Her voice stayed level, but her knuckles were white, gripping the fence wire. When do you want me gone? It's not about wanting. When? End of the month. She nodded once. I'll be out by then. That evening, Mai appeared at his door. I have a proposal, she said. Can I come in? They sat at his kitchen table, and she spread out a hand-drawn map. My father's ranch, 2 counties over. I still own it. 160 acres. Good water source, decent grass. Worthless without cattle. Mai, hear me out, she pressed, her voice holding that same iron. Stake me to a herd. 25 heifers from your surplus stock. I'll pay you back in calves over 3 years. We run both ranches, share resources and labor. Your place and mine, together. Arthur stared at the map. That's risky for both of us. Yes. If prices don't recover, we both lose. Why would you propose this? She met his eyes. Because maybe losing everything once doesn't mean you can't build something beautiful again. Because I believe in good bones. Your ranch has them. Mine does too. Together, we'd be stronger. Or we'd both fail. Maybe. But I'd rather fail trying than spend my life afraid to try. Arthur looked at the map, then at her fierce hope. His whole life had been about protecting himself, safety, control, isolation. Mai was offering the opposite, risk, partnership, connection. He thought about finding her in that storm, watching her save what he couldn't save alone. Partners, he said, offering his hand. Her smile was like the sun breaking through. Partners. They formalized it that night. Mai would provide the land, Arthur would provide the stock. They would share the work. It was madness, perhaps, but it felt like the only sane choice he had made in decades. May blurred into June, and June into July. The partnership worked seamlessly. They moved cattle between the properties, repaired fences, and cut hay. Mai's old house came alive again with fresh paint and repairs. The neighbors' skepticism gradually shifted as they saw the results, healthy herds and 2 ranches running better together than either had alone. Even Mary Miller stopped by with a peace offering. But as the partnership thrived, the careful distance between Arthur and Mai became harder to maintain. They were together constantly. Arthur found himself wanting to close the space they kept between themselves. Late August brought blessed rain. Arthur was checking his fences when he heard my calling him, excitement in her voice. He found her in her barn, standing in a birthing stall, tears on her cheeks. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," she laughed, pointing to a newborn calf nursing vigorously. "Everything's right." "The first calf from our partnership?" "She's perfect." The calf was red with a white face, sturdy and bright-eyed. Arthur stepped into the stall, the rain drumming on the roof, and realized this wasn't just a calf. It was proof. Proof that taking the risk had mattered. "We did it," Mai whispered. "We actually did it." She turned to him, rain-damp and radiant, joy breaking across her face. Arthur couldn't hold back anymore. He cupped her face in his hands. "My Lin, you saved more than my cattle. You gave me back more than a herd." Her hands rose to his wrists. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened, months of careful distance finally breaking. She tasted like rain and hope. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Mai laughed softly. "What now?" she whispered. "Now we stop pretending this is only about cattle." "Thank God," she smiled. "I was running out of ways to avoid you." "Stay," Arthur said. "Not in the foreman's cabin. Stay with me. What will people say? That we're partners. That we're building something together. That I love you." Her breath caught. "You love me?" "Yes. Since you rode through that storm like you owned it." "I love you too," she whispered. "Since you carried me into your house and sat beside my bed for 3 days." September brought harvest weather. The banker, Mr. Holloway, returned to review their combined books and shook his head in disbelief. "I'll be damned. You two actually pulled it off. I can extend your credit on better terms." After he left, Arthur found Mai on the porch, their porch now. "We made it," she said. "Never doubted you." "Liar. You doubted constantly." "Maybe a little." He took her hand. Just then, John Miller rode up. "Got a question for you both." A young fellow came through looking for work. Name Sam. Drifter type, but good with horses. Reminded me of someone. He glanced at Mai. "Send him over," Mai said. Sam arrived the next morning, 19, skinny, trying to hide his desperation. Mai saw herself in him instantly. "Why should we hire you?" Arthur asked. "Because I'll work harder than anyone else," the boy said, his voice cracking. "Because I got nowhere else to go." Mai stepped forward. "I was you 6 months ago. Someone gave me a shot anyway." They hired Sam on the spot. That evening, Arthur and Mai sat on the porch, rocking gently. The sun set over their joined herds. Sam was working in the distance, already proving himself. "You ever regret it?" Arthur asked. "Giving up drifting?" Mai laughed. "I wasn't drifting. I was lost." "There's a difference." She pointed to the pasture. "That's not just a herd. That's proof that losing everything once doesn't mean you can't build something beautiful." "We built something beautiful," Arthur agreed, pulling her close. "Your father would be proud," she said. "Mine too. We're building something that lasts." Darkness came softly. Their 2 ranches had become one, stronger together than either was alone. They had weathered the worst storm and found the best life. Inside each other's arms, they had found what they'd both been seeking: belonging. The story of Arthur and Mai reminds us that true strength isn't about standing alone, but about having the courage to let others in when the storms of life hit. Both characters had been hardened by loss and betrayal, building fences around their hearts to stay safe, yet they only found true security when they tore those fences down. By trusting each other and combining their broken pieces, they built something far greater than what they could have achieved in solitude. It teaches us that love and partnership are the ultimate survival tools, turning barren winters into springs full of life. Sometimes, the things we think we need to protect, our pride and our isolation, are exactly the things we need to surrender to find happiness.
What did you think of Arthur and Mai's decision to risk everything on a partnership? Do you think you would have been as brave as Mai to help a stranger in a blizzard?
Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and romance in the Wild West, please hit the like button and subscribe for more heart-touching tales. Thank you for watching.